For thousands of years, Native Americans lived on the land that we now call Missouri. There were 7 main tribes that lived in Missouri, including the Osage, Iowa, Missouri, Quapaw, Chickasaw, Oto, and Illini. The Native American tribes would often battle each other. The Missouri land was good for the Native Americans because there was deer and buffalo to hunt and plenty of fish to catch. They would use prairie grasses to weave baskets and make roofs. They would use the wood from the forest to make canoes, build shelters, and make fire. They would use the skins of animals to make clothing and shelters covers. The Missouri rivers were important to the Native Americans to have fresh water to drink. They also used the rivers to get from one place to another using canoes and bull boats. The Native Americans that lived in Missouri lived in teepees, mud houses, and wigwams. The Native Americans enjoyed living on the land of Missouri. A long time ago, the kings and queens of Europe were wanting silks and spices that they can only get in Asia.
So the kings and queens sent explorers west across the Atlantic Ocean to hopefully find a quicker route to Asia. Christopher Columbus was one of the explorers. He was sent by Spain while looking for Asia. He discovered the Bahamas.
Jacques Cartier sailed west for France. He found Northern America and claimed it for France, naming it New France.
Amerigo Vespucci was a sailor who sailed for Spain and Portugal. Amerigo sailed south and found South America. He determined that North and South America were not part of Asia, but totally new pieces of land. He claimed South America for Spain and Portugal.
John Cabot sailed for England and also found North America. Years later, the Pilgrims would come and settle at Plymouth Rock. Marquette and Joliet wanted to know if the Mississippi River led to the spices and silks in Asia. So 5 men voyaged down the Mississippi River in 2 canoes. Then they met Native American people along the way. Robert de La Salle was a fur trader who sailed for France. He was looking for a quick route to the Pacific Ocean, so he began exploring the Mississippi River. As he explored, he claimed all the land for France. Along the way, he learned many Native American languages. He soon learned that the Mississippi River led to the Gulf of Mexico. This is important to Missouri history because these men explored the Mississippi River, which included exploring parts of Missouri. The triangular trade took slaves from Africa and brought them to the Americas. Slaves traveled for at least 2 weeks in terrible conditions. They were often chained to each other and slept on hard floors on the ship. On this journey, slaves had nowhere to use the bathroom or have food and water to eat and drink. Many slaves died on this terrible journey. After 2 weeks, the slaves arrived in America and were sold to the farmers who lived there. The slaves would then go to work on farms called plantations. After the sailors got their money from selling the slaves, they would buy goods and sail back to England. They would sell the goods to Europeans and buy more goods with the money that they earned. Last, they would sail to Africa to trade the goods for new slaves. This cycle would continue to bring slaves to the Americans for 400 years. The Mississippi River in the Port of New Orleans was really important to the United States because farmers and businesses used the river to transport their crops to other countries. The Mississippi River and the Port of New Orleans were owned and controlled by France.
However, President Thomas Jefferson had learned that the French were getting ready to sell the Port of New Orleans to Spain. The United States was worried that if the Port of New Orleans was controlled by Spain, the U.S. wouldn't be allowed to use it.
So Thomas Jefferson sent Robert Livingston and James Monroe to talk to Napoleon to buy the Port of New Orleans from France. Thomas Jefferson told Livingston and Monroe they could buy the port for $10 million. Napoleon originally said no.
But soon Napoleon became desperate for money. He told them they could have the whole entire Port of New Orleans and the Louisiana Territory for $15 million.
So with this purchase, the United States doubled in size.
This purchase is important to Missouri history because the land that is Missouri was bought in the Louisiana Purchase.
Thomas Jefferson had just purchased the Louisiana Territory for the United States. However, no one knew what was on the land. So President Jefferson hired Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to lead a team to explore the territory. They started on the Missouri River near St. Louis, Missouri, and they worked their way all the way to the Pacific Ocean.
A team of 45 people and Clark's dog Seaman were on the journey. Along the way, the men met Sacagawea, a Native American woman. She and her baby joined them on the journey. She was a translator for the team so they could speak with other Native American tribes.
The journey was tough. They boarded up rivers against the stream. They crossed mountains, and sometimes the weather was cold and harsh. Sometimes they didn't have much to eat, and at one point they had to eat their horses.
They saw plants and animals they had never seen before, such as a grizzly bear, prairie dogs, and a beaver. The men even survived a grizzly bear attack, and Seaman survived an attack from a beaver. One night, Seaman saved the men from a buffalo that had wandered into camp.
They traveled all the way to the Pacific Ocean and back. Their journey took 2 years. The men used journals to write down what they saw along the way. They also created maps of the land. The journey was tough, but not one single person died along the way.
The pioneers wanted to get more land. They decided to travel west because the land hadn't been claimed yet.
The pioneers had a lot of danger ahead of them. Some dangers could have been snake bites, water illness, no food, being attacked, not able to farm, not able to fit everything in their wagons.
The pioneers' covered wagon didn't have much space. The pioneers couldn't put lots of stuff in the wagon because they needed to fit their food, kids, and tools. At night, they would put the wagons together in a circle so animals wouldn't get the pioneers and most wagons wouldn't get damaged.
They kept going west until they got to California and Oregon. The westward expansion and the Oregon Trail is important to Missouri because the journey started in Independence, Missouri.
The pioneers wanted new land, so they started to go west. The pioneers encountered Native Americans. At first, the Native Americans were friendly because Native Americans set up trade stations to trade with the pioneers. The pioneers started to get greedy, and they wanted the Native Americans' land and money.
One conflict was the Grattan Massacre. This conflict started from a single cow wandering into the Native Americans' land. The tribe killed the cow, and the pioneers got mad. They offered a horse for the cow, but the pioneers said no. The pioneers then killed the chief.
Another conflict was Massacre Rocks. For years, the Hudson Bay Trading Company traded with the Native Americans, but then the trading company was shut down and the Native Americans became poor, so they attacked the pioneers.
To stop the conflicts, the government put the Native Americans on reservations. Reservations are lands designated for Native Americans where they had to live. Native Americans in westward expansion are important to Missouri history because Native Americans lived in Missouri and were forced to move.
As people moved west, they decided to become a part of the United States. Missouri wanted to be an official state of the United States. Missouri wanted to enter the Union as a slave state.
Missouri wanted slaves so they could farm. Then there would have been an imbalance of power. It would be imbalance of power because they would have 11 states against slavery and 12 states for slavery. There was a lot of disagreement in 1820. The Missouri Compromise happened. 2 states had entered the Union to keep a balance of power.
So Missouri was a slave state and Maine was a free state. This was so important to Missouri because it's talking about how our state was free first, not official, but now our state is official. It also was important because it prevented the Civil War for 25 years.
The South wanted people to work their plantation. The plantations are large farms. They grew cotton, corn, and tobacco. The plantation owners can't do it all by themselves, but the farmers didn't want to pay for the people to work the land, so plantation owners bought people to work their plantations. So plantation owners bought people to work their plantations. They enslaved people brought over from Africa by the triangular trade. Even on the boat, the slaves were treated badly because they were chained to each other or to the ground. Then the plantation owners enslaved Africans to work their plantations. Slaves were treated badly. The slave owners had whips and sometimes would whip the slaves to death. The slaves would have to do all the work and have no pay. The slaves got scraps and leftovers from the owner's dinner. The slaves were treated so horribly. So the slaves decided to escape.
They escaped by using the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad was not actual railroad. It didn't have train tracks. They would just go house to house. They had special signals to see what house was a station or depot. The people who owned the house were abolitionists. Abolitionists were people who want to end slavery. The people who led the escape were the conductors.
One famous conductor of the Underground Railroad was Harriet Tubman. She went back to slave territory 13 times and never lost a passenger. Escaping slaves led to the Fugitive Slave Act, which then caused the Civil War. Slavery is important to Missouri history because Missouri was a slave state and slaves were in Missouri. Slaves would try to escape, so the Underground Railroad was in Missouri.
Slavery wasn't the only conflict that led to the Civil War. There were lots of conflicts that led to the Civil War. One conflict was the Compromise of 1850. California wanted to enter the Union as a free state. They were below the Missouri Compromise line, and some people thought that wasn't okay. So it caused conflict.
Part of the Compromise of 1850, the Fugitive Slave Act stated that if you saw slaves escape, you had to return them. Even if you are in a free state, you must return the slaves to their owner.
Uncle Tom's Cabin is a book that tells people how slavery really was, and it was not a good thing. It was written by Harriet Beecher Stowe and published in 1851. She wanted to inform people how slaves were treated. It motivated people to help end slavery. It contributed to the start of the Civil War.
Another conflict was split in Kansas. Because of the Kansas-Nebraska Act in 1854, people got to vote if they wanted Kansas and Nebraska to be a free state or a slave state. There was a lot of conflict and violence because people are moving and fighting for the right they want. There was a government that was anti-slavery and another government that was pro-slavery. In the end, Kansas became a free state.
Another conflict was the Dred Scott decision. Dred Scott was born in a slave territory. His owner died. He moved to Illinois, which was a free state. He was owned by John Stanford. He thought he should be free because he lived in a free state. When they went to Supreme Court in 1857, they said a slave is a slave no matter where they live. They were not citizens of the United States, so they could not sue in federal court.
Next, Abraham Lincoln was elected in 1860. He was not supported by the South because they knew he would not support the expansion of slavery, and that's exactly what he did. He worked to stop and end slavery. The South succeeded and became the Confederacy.
All of this led to the Civil War happening. These conflicts lead to the change after the Civil War. Slavery becomes illegal.
Leading up to the Civil War, the southern states decided that they wanted to succeed and create the Confederacy. In 1861, Missouri decided they would be a border state. Missouri stayed with the Union, but they allowed slavery. Missouri had a lot of resources like corn, pork, and grain. They had horses and mules, iron and lead. They had manufacturing and military advantage and passed to travel with rivers.
But then two people were divided. Missouri was divided, so they had two governments. Because one state, but two sides. One governor wanted no slavery, the other governor wanted slavery, so they split. Then they argued, and that is how the Civil War started.
During the Civil War, William Jewell College was a hospital in Missouri. There were some battles. After the Civil War, slavery ended. People who did not want slavery won the Civil War in 1865.
Abraham Lincoln said slaves are free because the Emancipation Proclamation.
13th Amendment said that slavery is illegal.
The 14th Amendment gave citizenship to African Americans.
The 15th Amendment, all males can vote no matter what their race. This is important to the Missouri because they had resources that helped the Union win the Civil War.